Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. Today I'm celebrating 2,000 followers on Instagram with an international giveaway, plus I'm going to do the school days book tag. So I'm celebrating 2,000 followers on Instagram, which I am over the moon about. I can't believe it. Thank you to everybody who's liked, commented, followed me and enjoys my content. So on YouTube, I'd like my YouTube subscribers to be able to take part as well. So if you would like to, I'll put details in the description box of how you can take part. First thing you must do though is click like and subscribe to my channel and make a comment on this video. So this is an original tag that I discovered on Victoria's channel, What Victoria Read. She's a really excellent booktuber, and I've just started following her and a recommendation from another booktuber that I love, Spinster's Library. I'll link some of my favourite booktubers in the description box below if you'd like to follow them. So she created this original book tag, and it's based around the times of day for the school day plus some lessons, so you can pick as many. I'll put all the questions in the description box as well, because if you'd like to take part, please make sure you give credit to What Victoria Read, and then you can tag as many people as you like. I'd like to tag people, but I'm not quite sure who to tag or who would want to take part. So if you're watching this video and you'd like to take part in the tag, consider yourself tagged. So the school days book tag works out quite nicely for me because I am a teacher, qualified teacher. So I'm a primary school teacher, in case I haven't mentioned that already, probably mentioned it like a million times. But Victoria's a secondary school PGCE student. I don't know how she is doing a PGCE during a pandemic and running a YouTube channel. I'm in awe of you. So Victoria, if you're watching this, thanks for these questions. I'm really looking forward to doing them. So the tag is themed around the school day with some themed lesson type questions thrown in. So the first question is for the first bell of the day in school, and it is, what books got you into reading as a child? A book, it said, but I haven't got the exact book here, but I have got some of them. So Enid Blyton. Famous Five was sort of second series that I got interested in. The earliest book I remember just being completely engrossed in and completely swept away by was the Magic Faraway Tree, and there was another series called The Wishing Chair, very similar, children going off into magical worlds and everything else. But I did also completely adore the Famous Five. So I'm going to try and do this in the order of the school day, and I'm going to do a subject next, which is English. And the questions for English is tell us about a book that you studied at school and recommend one book that you would like to add to the curriculum. So a book that I studied in school, I can't really remember. I remember being told stories in primary school, but in terms of studying books, I had to go back to my A-levels really, and I thought I'd go back to my A-levels because I've got a book that I absolutely love, and this is my actual A-level copy. It's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, classic, and it's one of, I think it was the first A-level text that I studied, which is really, really useful for, really lucky for me for English Lit, because I absolutely love the story and I love this copy. It's really old because I did my A-levels a long time ago, and it's still got my notes written throughout. So when I read it, I can see my 16, 17-year-old scribblings in the margins, probably too faint to pick up on them. But yeah, and in the back and everything, I think there's some notes for my exam and everything that I put in here, because you're allowed to bring the text in to the exam because you need to be able to refer to it. But yeah, you've got all my sort of 16-year-old scribblings in there. I love this. What a great book to study for English literature. And a book that I would actually add to the curriculum, because that was the second part of this challenge. A book that I would add to the curriculum is this one, The Midnight Guardians. I'm not a secondary school teacher, I'm a primary school teacher, and this is one of the best middle grade books I've read in a long time. It's just so special. I've got a full review of it, a video of it, and a blog, so I'll link those in the description box below as well. But look at this cover. But it's set in the Second World War, and children study the Second World War in Year 6, so this would be an excellent stimulus for discussion. It's just a fantastic story, but I'm not going to go into what it's about because I've got a video on that, which I'll link below, and I'll put a card up for you. The next question is the break time Belle question. Which book have you most recently had to DNF? I'll put it up on the screen because I don't have a copy of it, but it was Ready Player 2. I listened to the audio. I loved Ready Player 1. I know it's kind of like a real nostalgia fest, and it's not the best written book, but I loved it because I'm a child of the 80s, not born in the 80s, grew up in the 80s, but I absolutely loved Ready Player 1. And so I was really thrilled to see Ready Player 2 come out, but it's terrible. And I really didn't enjoy it, even being read by Will Wheaton, who I love reading the first book. So I listened to about 3 or 4 hours of it, and then I just thought I can't waste any more of my life on this book, so I DNF'd it. The next question is maths. I'm chosen to do English and maths because at primary school we do those first thing in the morning. So maths question is, how do you rate your books? I'm not really hugely into rating. I don't take it hugely seriously, but so just roughly though, a book gets 5 stars from me if it is something that I couldn't put down, that I can imagine myself rereading over and over again, because I'm a big rereader, which will become apparent when I talk about a few more books. But books I absolutely love and will love for life, they get 5 stars. 4-star reads are excellent books that I really loved, that impacted on me, but maybe not as passionately as the 5-star reads, but it doesn't mean that they weren't absolutely fantastic. 4-star reads are still brilliant books. A 3-star read is a good book. You know, it's the book that you take on holiday with you, you enjoy. Quite a lot of the crime fiction I read gets 3 stars from me because it's not like I'm ever going to read it again. I enjoyed it, it did its job, it was perfectly fine. 2 stars are things that didn't quite make 3 stars because I was enjoying it and then something happened, maybe a bad ending, or there was something in it that was problematic for me. 1 star is a DNF. Basically, so yeah, if something gets 1 star, it's a DNF for me, because I'm not going to carry on reading a book that is so problematic that I can't even give it 2 stars. So that's my rating system. So the next question is lunchtime, and tell us about your favourite book that features food. And my favourite book that features food is a series of books. It's the Mallory Towers books by Enid Blyton, if I have to pick, because I just have such fond memories of wanting to be at midnight feasts, because if you're not aware of them, they're boarding school stories that were written in the 1940s or 50s, and they featured lots of midnight feasts and sweets and tuck boxes and things like that, and I always wanted to take part in them. But also, even though lots of the food was really 1940s and 50s based, there's lots of ginger beer, which I love, but I hadn't even had as a child, and there were lots of condensed milk and really strange 1940s and 50s foods, but even so I still wanted to eat them. So yeah, Mallory Towers. Okay, so the next question was for history, and I had to do this question because aside from fantasy, I'm a huge historical fiction fan, and the question was, which 3 historical fiction books have you enjoyed the most? And I couldn't just stick to 3, but I'm going to do a few. I'm not going to do a huge amount of questions, so I'm just going to tell you about them. So this isn't the book that started the series, but I absolutely love, much like Victoria herself, because she did this in her school days video, C.J. Sansom's Shardlake books. This is one of them, Revelation, but the first book is Dissolution, and Shardlake is a lawyer, is a hunchback lawyer set in Tudor, in Elizabethan England. It starts off in sort of Henry VIII's reign and moves into Queen Elizabeth I's reign, and they are mysteries. They're brilliantly written, they're so atmospheric, and I read the first book, Dissolution, whilst I was on jury service at the Old Bailey, which, if you are not familiar with the UK sort of legal system, the Old Bailey is the sort of highest court in the land, really, I think, or the most famous. I don't know if it's the highest, but it's the most famous, and I was on jury service there for 3 weeks. And the Dissolution, he's a lawyer, and he's the Inns of Court. Basically, when I was out reading at lunchtimes and reading this book, I was in the very area that they were talking about, and I was having lunch on one of the roads where he supposedly rode his horse up and things like that. So I've got a lot of fond memories of those books. I haven't reread any of them, but I do love them. And I haven't read the latest one because I've heard not great things about it, but it's a brilliant series, and if you like mystery and if you like historical fiction, this is definitely my favourite of that genre. So my next choice is I, Claudius by Robert Graves. It's a 20th century classic historical fiction all about Claudius, the Emperor Claudius. There's an amazing BBC adaptation from the 70s, I believe, starring Derek Jacobi as Claudius, and it's brilliant. And Claudius tells the tale of the Claudian emperors from Augustus through to himself. And yeah, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. If you like Roman history, then this is fantastic. I ended up studying classical archaeology at university because of this book, so it means a lot to me. So the third book I'm going to talk about for historical fiction that I love and enjoyed so much that it's one of my favourite books is Shogun by James Clavell. I haven't read it in years, but I read it 2 or 3 times. It's a tonk of a book. It's about 1,200 pages, and I will reread it because it's just brilliant. And it's set in 17th century Japan, and it follows the adventures of a guy who's a British pilot, who's basically a navigator, who's navigated for some trade ships to get to Japan because they want to trade silk with them. And at the time, the British and the Portuguese are, I don't know if they're at war, but they're hostile. And he gets there because the Portuguese have been trading with Japan for a long time and kept the routes to Japan really secret, but he's managed to get there with a Dutch ship, and he is the first Englishman in Japan, is the premise of it. And he has to learn all about these sort of feudal customs and everything else. Brilliant. It's brilliantly written. It's full of it's epic, so there's so many characters and lots to learn when you read it. I don't know how, I imagine the author studied quite a lot about feudal Japan, but so I hope it is as accurate historically as it could be, because he isn't Japanese himself. But it's a brilliant book. It's just a brilliant novel and really excellent read. And I'm going to give some honourable shout outs to 2 other historical fiction books that I absolutely love and adored. First one is Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, which is epic and amazing. It's another big massive book, and it follows the building of a cathedral, which sounds really dull, but it's not. It's a brilliant book full of amazing characters and a brilliant plot, and it's just wonderful. So it's sort of set in, I think, 12th century England, and it follows the building of a cathedral and the start of it. And there are other books in the series as well, which are, I can't really remember. I read the second book and I don't really remember it that well, so I'm not sure if they're quite as good as the Pillars of the Earth, but the Pillars of the Earth is well loved and it's a great book. Really recommend that. The second book I'd like to recommend that I haven't got here is The Tea Rose by Jennifer Donnelly, which is set in Whitechapel in Victorian times, and it follows the fortunes of a young woman. And that's all I'm going to say about it, but if you like sort of really, I think it's quite fast paced, there's lots going on in it, and I just remember being gripped from the start and reading this saga of her life and her family and love and all sorts of things. But yeah, brilliant book. So the next question is PE, and it's Show Us the Biggest Book on Your TBR, and I'm holding this one up because it is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski, I think it's pronounced. I might be completely wrong, but it's the heftiest one because it's not necessarily the longest book on my TBR. I think it's about 700 or 800 pages. It's 650 pages. And the reason it's been on my TBR for so long is because of the size of it. It's like a textbook from university and it just weighs an absolute ton. And I carry books around with me, or I did pre-pandemic. So this is a perfect time to be reading it actually, and I haven't. But it's so heavy that even just sitting up holding it just doesn't feel comfortable to read, and you can't get it in any other format because it's a very unusual book. It's a kind of a horror, psychological thriller book. It's really unusual in the way it's written, and it's and I can't remember the word for it, so I'm going to look up the word for it and put it on the screen. But it's that type of book that's told through documentation, so it's a story that's told through reports and letters and things like that. So it's actually really the way it's laid out is really key to, that's why you can only get it in paperback. You can't get it in audiobook, you can't get it on Kindle, you can only get it in this paperback. And I had to search out this paperback. I got a second-hand copy because I think it was quite expensive to buy it new. and have yet to read it. It's supposed to be amazing though. It's supposed to be like it's supposed to be unlike anything you've ever read before. So that's the biggest book on my TBR pile at the moment. Okay, so the next one I found really difficult to pick just 3 as well. I'm going to do the art question, which is show us 3 books that you think have the best covers. So I'm not going to speak, I'm just going to show you some books and some pretty covers, and there are more than 3. So the geography question, a book that has epic world building or a great sense of place. As a fantasy fan, it was really, really hard to pick. It's a choice between the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin or Way of Kings, The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Both books, the world is so key to the story, which sounds ridiculous to say that about fantasy books, but some books are incidentally kind of, the world building doesn't impact the story. The setting doesn't impact the story as much, whereas in those books, 5th season and Way of Kings, I don't want to do any spoilers, but the world, the weather systems and the geography of the world actually impact the plot and the characters and their lives in such a huge way. Both quite different in the way they're told. Highly recommend N.K. Jemison's book. It's the first of the Broken Earth trilogy, and this is the first of the Stormlight Archive. Broken Earth trilogy is finished, this isn't, but he's quite a prolific writer. So if you want to start a really good fantasy book, if you are experienced at reading fantasy, I'd say give them a go. If you've never read fantasy before, then, and they're not a great place to start because they're quite, they reward the experienced fantasy reader, and I think people who aren't experienced at reading fantasy will struggle with them a little bit, but they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I've done this in such a random order, you're probably going to see this pile go up and down behind me as I edit, but anyway, another book I just want to give honourable mention to for world building is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, which I absolutely love, and yeah, everyone loves Westeros, right? Everyone loves that whole world, that whole kingdom, the whole world fell in love with it during the series, which I haven't watched, and I don't want spoiled for me because I'm going to watch it once the books are finished. Final Bell, which book have I most recently finished reading? I've just finished reading Scarlet by Marissa Meyer, which is book 2 of the Lunar Chronicles. I don't have the book because I read it on the Libby app, the library app, and it's a YA science fiction series based on fairy tales, which is very clever, and I am really enjoying the series. So the last question is Final Bell. Tell us about a book you go to when you need to take a breath. And I took that to mean a book that comforts you when things are bad, when you're upset, when you've had a bad day, when you just need to take a step back from the world. And I've gone for Mort. It's not just this book, but it's the entire Discworld series. I've picked this one up because it's my favourite Discworld book, because I read it first. But it's hard to pick a favourite really, but I would always pick Mort because it's the first one I read. But the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett has been in my life since I was about 13 years old, and I am getting on a bit now, so 30 odd years it's been in my life, and I've always returned to it. And it only occurred to me recently, because of the amount that I've reread it and the amount of comfort I take from it, that if I had to name a favourite fantasy series of all time, it would have to be the Discworld series, because I couldn't do without them. They're like a comfort blanket, and I could have chosen these books for so many of these categories. So the cover art is something I would have chosen for beautiful cover art, because these covers by Josh Kirby just fascinate me. I adore them. It's a shame that he didn't live long enough to do all of Terry Pratchett's books, but they're my favourite covers, and I prefer them over any of the newer editions, even the special folio editions that people collect and love, which I will collect because I love beautiful books. But these covers are just very special to me, and they just remind me of a time and a place in my life, and they bring me back to that. And he's hilarious. He's one of the best writers that we've ever had in the UK, hands down. So these are my go-to books when I need to take a breath. And that is my school days book tag. If you're interested in doing the book tag, you can check out the original video from what Victoria read down below. I've got it in a link, and you can try out the questions. I'll list them all. You don't have to do all the questions. I didn't do all of them. You don't have to do as many as I did, and you can just pick and choose whichever ones you like and adapt them to suit yourself. I'm sure Victoria won't mind. And hopefully, if you enjoyed this video, please click like and consider subscribing, and hopefully I'll see you again here soon. Bye!